In this lesson, you will learn how to solve percent equations. The easiest way to solve percent equations is to substitute each of these words with a symbol. When you see the word is means equals. Find means x equals. What and number both mean x. Of means multiply. And what percent means x over 100. So if I take the percent equation in number 1, what percent of 100 is 45, I'm going to translate this based on the table above. What percent translates to x over 100, of to multiply, 120, is to an equal symbol, and then the number 45. So now I have x over 100 times 120 equals 45, and our goal is to solve for x. So the first thing I'll do to solve for x is I will multiply these two fractions together. X times 120 is 120x, and 100 times 1 is 100, equals 45. And I'd like to cross multiply, but before I do that, I will cancel off the zeros in 120 and 100, and then 12 and 10 also can reduce to 6 and 5. They're both divisible by 2, so already this is looking easier. 6x over 5 equals 45 over 1. Now I'm ready to cross multiply, and I always start with the diagonal that has the variable. So 6x times 1 is 6x, and then I take 5 times 45. 5 times 45 is 225. I place an equal sign in between the two products, and to solve for x, I divide both sides by 6. So normally when you're solving a percent equation, you have a choice of writing your answer as a decimal or as a fraction. But since this particular problem asks for what percent, I will write this as a decimal. So on the side, I will take 6 and divide it into 225. 6 divides into 22 3 times, and into 45 7 times, and I will add a 0, bringing up the decimal point to make this 30, and 6 divides into 30 5 times. So my x is equal to 37.5, but since this said what percent, and I wrote what percent as x over 100, I don't have to move my decimal point over. I just add on the percent symbol, and x is equal to 37.5%. For number 2, what number translates to x, is translates to an equal symbol, and 65%, we can actually write 65% in one of two ways. One way is to write it as 65 over 100, and the other way would be to write it as a decimal. So first let's finish this equation, and then on the other side of the page I'll write it as a decimal. Of means times, and then 12. So x equals 65 over 100 times 12, or x equals 0.65 times 12. So to finish this, we have a choice of which equation we could solve. I'm going to solve the second one because the second one appears easier. All I have to do is multiply 0.65 times 12. And then I move my decimal point over 2 places, so I get x is equal to 7.80 or just 7.8. For number 3, find 20% of 540. Find translates to x equals 20%, same thing with this problem, is I'll write it as 20 over 100, and then I'll also write it as 0.20. Of means times, and then 540. So I can solve this equation, or I can solve x equals 0.20 times 540. So in this example, I'm going to use the first equation. So my suggestion to do is when you're doing this on your own is to write out both equations, decide which one is easier, and only solve one of them. Since this 540 is over 1, and I have 2 zeros in the denominator, they cancel out with each one of the zeros in the numerator, so I'm just left with x equals 2 times 54. And 2 times 54 is 108, and that's the end of this question. So if you had multiplied 0.20 times 540, you would get the same answer of 108. For number 4, we have 36 is. So that's 36 equals 12% is 12 over 100 or 0.12 of means multiply. What number is x? So let's write this out twice and decide which one looks simpler. So we have 36 equals 12 over 100 times x, or 36 equals 0.12 times x. In this problem, they're actually about the same. If I take the equation on the right, I would have to divide both sides by 0.12. But if I take the equation on the left and write this as a fraction, 36 over 1 equals 12x over 100, and cross multiply, I get 12x equals 3600. I still have to divide the first equation, but at least I don't have to divide with decimals, so I think the first equation appears easier. And this we can do in our heads because 12 divides into 36 3 times, and we just add 2 zeros. So x is equal to 300. So if you had chosen the second equation and divide both sides by 0.12, when you divide 0.12 into 36, you would have to move the decimal point over twice, but then add 2 zeros to 36, so you end up with the same thing. 12 divided into 3600. So either way, you'll get an answer of 300. For number 5, what number is our x? And then is means equals. 1.2% is 1.2 over 100 of means times 36. So I'll write this one out twice. What number is x? Is means equals 1.2%. We can take this decimal and move it over 2 places to the left to remove the percentage symbol so that we get 0.012 times 36. So I think in this question the second equation looks easier because all I have to do is multiply 0.012 times 36. And then I have three numbers to the right of the decimal point, so I get 0.432. X is equal to 0.432. For number 6, 16.5 is, so we have 16.5 equals, and then what percent, there's only one way to write what percent, and that's x over 100. Of means multiply, and then 56. So because we're finding a percent, this means we'll want to write our answer So let's start by writing this as 16.5 over 1 equals 56x over 100. And I'm going to go right to cross multiplying. 56x times 1 is 56x, and then 16.5 times 100. Anytime you multiply a number by 100, you take the decimal point and you move it over 2 times to the right so that we get 1650, 1650. And then I divide both sides by 56. So on the side here, I will take 56 and divide it into 1650. So starting with 165, 56 times 2 is equal to 112. I subtract, bring down the 0, and 56 times 9 is 504. 530 minus 504 is 26, and I'm going to add a 0 to make this 260. Bring the decimal point up and multiply 56 by 4. And I subtract, changing this number to a 5. And one more time, I'll add another 0 to make this 360. And 6 times 56 is 336. And I get a remainder of 24. And I'll stop here. And if I look at my decimal, I have 29.46. I'm going to round this up to 29.5 and say that my x is equal to 29.5. But because my question was asking for what percent, I have to add a percent symbol to the end. And the last problem, number 7, is a little bit more challenging than the first 6, but I will follow the same rules as I did above. 60%, I'll start with 60 over 100. Of means times, a number is x, is equal to is the same as just is, so I place my equal sign, 104, more than, now this word, these two words rather, are not in the list above, but more than means plus. 20% is 20 over 100, Of means times. 40%, 40 over 100. Of, another times. The number is our x. So in this problem, I'm going to leave all of the percents as out of 100 instead of writing them as a decimal, because a lot of the zeros will cancel. 6 over 10 times x is now 6x over 10 equals 104 plus, these zeros cancel, so that I have 2 over 10 times 4x over 10. And if I multiply these two fractions together next, I get 8x over 100. So this problem is looking a little bit better. We have several things simplified and canceled, but we still have this equation with fractions where we have to solve for x. So to make this easier, I'm going to take 104 and put it over 1 and say that my least common denominator is equal to 100. So if my least common denominator is equal to 100, I want to multiply this first fraction by 10, the second fraction by 100. You can times this last fraction by 1, but you don't need to because you already have 100 in the denominator. And 6x times 10 is 60x over 100 equals 104 times 100 is 10,400 plus 8x over 100. So when you have an equation with fractions, get all of the denominators to be the same so that you can cross them all out. And now it looks a lot easier as 60x equals 10,400 plus 8x. To solve for x, I subtract 8x from both sides to get 52x. And then if I divide both sides by 52, 52 divides into 104 twice, so x is equal to 200.